this week we have an awesome
The
surprise
best week
for
ever.
everyone. The best week ever. We have our podcast favorite, Ashley Winstead.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
I
Oh my
have
God.
been dying to be here and talk to you too. You are such a bright spot in my like Instagram feed and in my like earpods, listening to you guys. So I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my
Oh,
God. I'm so
we're so
happy you're
excited.
joining us. I know
For
you've
people
been
who
like super
haven't
good about
heard,
not being on social media.
we're just too excited.
We're so excited.
I am too, guys.
Okay, go on.
No, I was just gonna say Ashley probably would have been on the podcast like a lot sooner, but she's been so good at like restricting herself on social media that I was like, if she's not active right now, like I'm not going to bother her about like hopping
Aw.
on the podcast because like she's busy. She's got shit going on. So, and plus like you're just giving us all these incredible stories to read nonstop. So I am not going to interrupt that writing process.
Yeah.
That is so sweet and thoughtful. I will clear my schedule for you guys 100%, just for future note.
Yeah.
Never busy for you guys, but this has been a wild year. Like now
Mhm.
that now we're coming to the end of it, I'm kind of like doing that reflective thing. I'm like, whoa, released 2 books, went on 2 book tours. One book tour was like basically a solid month long.
Yeah.
2 weeks of which was a different state every day. One day, 3 states in like 12 hours.
Wow.
And it has been quite a year. And
Yeah.
I am like looking out at 2024, and I have no books releasing next year, which is a very different pace than I've been at for like since 2021. And
Right.
part of me is like a little fearful, like, will people forget that I exist? Will whatever, and it's just weird not to be releasing a book. But on the other hand, I'm very grateful to be able to rest and write.
Yes.
So all my tarot cards are telling me to rest and
Chill
like,
out. Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say, when you were listing that tour, I was like, how did you stay healthy? So rest is probably good.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why, I mean, when I got back from the tour, it didn't even stop because I had lined up all these in-person book club meetings like here in Houston. And so I was bopping around and they were amazing. And I love meeting readers. Like I truly do. That's probably why I stayed healthy, because my like little brain was like, this is so fun, and
That's
didn't
cool.
take into account like, yeah, that is also draining,
Yeah.
like
And just a lot of
because I'm
people
like,
to
oh
be
my
around.
God. Right. A lot of people. And, my first 3 books released during like pandemic, basically.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really had a proper book tour. And so book tours are increasingly disappearing for writers. And so I was just like, seize this opportunity. Like you might not ever get another chance to, stay in Holiday Inns across the country and go to indie bookstores, the dream.
Right.
And so just like run with it. So I
Yeah.
really did. But yeah, no, I think it hit me hard, like
Yeah.
about 7 days after I got home, right when I was done with all the in-person book tour stuff. My body was just like, and now we are demanding you sleep for 48 straight hours. And I was just like, okay.
I bet.
Anyway, but I got to go around the country and see so many of my favorite people. Hallie Sutton, Vanessa Lilly, Megan Collins, just like I got to go with Danielle Valentine, who I love. So
that is so cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing like group of people to be around too.
I know. I
Yeah.
think your Hallie Sutton episode is one of my favorites of
It
all
was
time.
so fun.
It was
I
so much
laughed
fun.
so hard.
Oh my God. Like
We need to
tell
have
me
her
that
on
you're
again.
yeah, like tell me that you're gonna like get me Taco Bell and like take me to like a movie theater by like a graveyard and I'm like on the plane. Like,
Yeah.
like
She
game
is
on.
I love her. Yeah, that episode was so
Yes.
fun.
Oh,
So the other fun thing that
Mhm.
that I was talking over Gare earlier at the beginning for people who don't know, because some people may not have heard the story. When I did an episode with Ashley over 2 years ago, she
wild.
basically referenced Gare and how we both talked about books the same way. And that was how we are connected. So now all three of us are on a
Yes.
podcast from that
Mhm.
connection.
Wait, I did this?
Yes, I
Yeah.
thought you knew that.
Yeah.
I have never been prouder of
You
literally
should
any
be.
of my accomplishments. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this podcast is because you like
Yeah,
kind of like
you played
introduced us to each
matchmaker,
other with like us not knowing one another.
and you
Oh
like
Then we
my
started
reference
like
God.
him in
following
the
each other.
podcast.
Yeah. I
It's wild.
basically I literally do reference you like on Gare, like everywhere I go on tour. I've made so many people write down your handle.
Oh,
Oh, I love that.
Like, know that. Feel like because I often get asked, like my interest in doing that is I often get asked, like, well, who would you cast? Or I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
even
that was
play
what
that
I
game.
asked you.
Go to my friend Gare's page.
Yes.
Yep. And here's his handle, and what he does is canon. Like that is where it is. And also
Yes.
he's delightful, so you need to be following him. So
it's so funny that you
yay.
say that too, because every like now and then I'm like thinking about it now and like retrospect, and I'm like, this makes sense because like every now and then I'll get like a notification that somebody like liked or commented on like a review and casting that I did for one of your books. And I'll be like, it'll be like a 2-year-old post or something. And I'm like, oh, like I can't believe they found that. Or like somebody will be like, did you cast like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife? Because like I need to see it now. And I'm like, okay, I'll send it over. So it's really funny because it's kind of like I
So
can almost like mark when you've had those conversations because like I get like
yes.
random notifications on Instagram.
Like someone's all up in your history, like
Yeah.
liking the photos. I love it. I love it. That makes me really happy.
Oh my
Reciprocal.
God.
Yep.
Well,
So yeah, and the thing that struck me is just the two of you are so damn smart and thoughtful about what
never
you
been called
read.
thoughtful before.
How is that possible?
I
You're
think we
such
mean in a more personal sense than just talking about books, is what he means.
Oh. But you're such a thoughtful friend. So I don't.
That's true.
To the two of you, I am. To everyone else, I'm like a little heathen.
Same. My circle's small, okay?
Yeah.
You're like
Thank you.
that was like
We'll sit and
bangs
take a
Gare.
compliment now.
No,
I know.
and I was just like, oh, I
Yeah.
had the
It's
best
just wild.
conversations with you.
I've
Yeah.
never had like somebody who like we admire so much and like we love so much like be more complimentary to us than we are to them.
Right, that's true.
Especially because
The
like we're
love is
like
very mutual, you guys. You
we're
know
like
that.
such fangirls. Like we're always like,
I
Ashley
know.
Winstead, Ashley Winstead. Like we do like usually like we do like an icebreaker. And like one of the icebreakers I've always wanted to do is like if you were given the opportunity to co-write a book with an author, like who would you pick? But like I've never asked it because I know that we would both like
I
we would both
know.
say you and then we would be like fighting over like who got to like co-write a book with you first.
It's
That's
true.
very well.
I think
Now
you're
you're
right.
putting ideas in my head about co-writing books with y'all.
That
Yeah,
would be
there's
wild.
that too.
Yeah.
But
That would be
when you were
wild.
saying fangirling, one of my things that I've talked about, I don't know with who, probably just Tyler over and over and over again all year, is something we were talking about before we were on air about containing multitudes. So the idea of like you can just be multiple things and you don't have to just go in one direction. And so like this year, it's like I've talked about you as like a writer who like exemplifies that. And then also Taylor Swift. But in some ways, same things where like all of her eras, she really there are some that are so distinct and so different. And like you're like, I'm gonna write the stories I'm like wanting to write at the time. And like you're in thrillers and you're in romance. So like how do you do what you do?
Oh,
Good one.
the fact that you put me and Taylor Swift in the same paragraph and compared my books to like her eras is
Yes.
very exciting to me. Yeah, I think it's like it is that exact reality that within like Gare, you're super into romance right now. It's like scratching
Mhm.
an itch and like doing something for you that that you're really into that's different than the thriller and the horror. And
Yeah.
I think it's just okay, surface level, I will say that it is just the fact that we all contain multitudes and there's all of those people and voices inside. And you know, like one day you wake up, and this is why I love fashion too, but you put on your like Avril Lavigne punk girl skater pants and you're like, I'm a little like I'm like a little skater punk girl today. And the next day
Yes.
you're in your like folklore braids and you're like,
Yes.
I'm a little cardigan wearing like forest elf today, you know? And it's like
Yes.
all of those things are possible.
Mhm.
That's my like not untrue but surface level. And just to dig a little bit deeper, because it's you guys, and I know that's okay and you won't like look at me weird, but I think the fact that I grew up moving every 2 years, um
Ooh.
and was like the oldest daughter, and so and
Mhm.
also like a perfectionist and a striver and a people pleaser, like all of those things combined to make being learning how to be different people to different people, like whatever people
Mm.
wanted to see,
Yeah.
and whatever was going to be most pleasing to people, like it created that fluidity in me. So like, you
Mm.
know, I feel really comfortable hopping from one group of people into another very different group of people and like being a very different person within, like still being me, but like wearing those different parts of me, like letting
Yeah.
them come out. And I think that's what I lean on, or like that's what I'm kind of channeling when I'm writing my
Mm.
different genres with the different voices. So that's my my like
I love
girl who
that
has been in
answer.
too much therapy answer.
Oh
That's
my
why I
God,
was
I
making
Too
love
me think
much
it.
it was
about
me.
things. Yeah.
I think like every time I talk to you or read your books, I'm like, oh yeah, we've both been through therapy.
Yeah, it's very obvious.
And I'm like,
That is
maybe I
so
should
cool
try
though.
Yeah.
it.
Well, I have not been in therapy for about a year now.
Yeah.
Um, so and like I think the writing is weirdly flowing more than it was when
Mm.
I was in therapy. So I
Yeah.
think I'm like channeling a lot of what I was getting out of therapy like into my
That's
books.
cool.
So who knows what my 2025 books will look like. I'll be like
Right,
you're reading
right.
them like, oh damn, she should have been seeing a therapist. This is like, you know, too much.
Well, we always
No.
like Kate and I always like talk about how much like I love like bleak books. Like I love like a bleak ending, like anything that just makes me like feel like my life is over at the end of it. Like I love like the darker the better. And so I completely
Love you.
like get where you're like coming from with that because like if it's
Yeah.
gonna make me cry or like rip me to shreds, then like that's what I want. And you know, like this is probably like the best time for you because I
Mm.
would imagine after having like 5 books come out in the past like 2 or 3 years that like
Yeah.
this is the first time that you didn't finish a book and give yourself like a 12-hour break and start your next one.
Yeah, it
Yes.
seems like it.
You know, like I mean you're like
Um,
I'll have breakfast, I'll take a nap and then like it's time for like
Yes.
my next book.
you literally could not, like, I know you're joking, but it's very accurate. Like
No, I'm not joking.
my okay, good, because
I don't
that
know
is
if maybe
literally
we've
what it
already
looks like.
had this conversation or like I just like picked up on the vibe, but like that's just kind of like what I'm imagining is you're like I'll get a good night's sleep and then like I'll just start on something
Yeah.
next.
Yes. And honestly, it's not letting up in 2024. Like that writing schedule is still,
Mhm.
so I have my next thriller draft one due January 31st.
Oh wow.
And the edits to my new genre, romantic drama slash family genre, due
Mm.
February 29th. So I do have to just like
Oh,
back to
wow.
back, do that, and then, you know, it'll be like pitching the next thriller
Mm-hmm.
to sell. Like, so I have to dream up a whole sexy new idea. You know, and like the pressure is high when it's the one that you're trying to go out and sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's like I always feel like I'm a little more creative and at ease on book two of every contract because I'm like, you already bought this. Like I can do
Oh,
like that's
Yeah.
how I did The Last Housewife. That's kind of like
Mm.
where I'm at now. It makes me feel like freer to take risks because
Mm.
there is so much pressure on selling that, you know, the book in the rhythm, in the cycle. That's like the sell book, you know, the one you're going out with
Mm-hmm.
where your contract's up. So now, yeah, and you're like, oh, it has to be so commercial and what's going to sell. And that's a little more pressure, you know, because I am a working writer in that this is how I pay my mortgage and you
Mm-hmm.
know this is, you know, how I put food on my table. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is not like a side thing that I just do for the passion of it.
Right.
I have to, which, you know, there are pros and cons to that. Like
Mm-hmm.
one, you don't have as much, you know, con, you don't have as much time, but there was a certain freedom when I had my day job
Mm-hmm.
where I really indulged myself taking risks because I was like, okay, if this crashes and burns, still gonna pay my rent, you know, like that.
Right.
Yeah.
My livelihood is
Mm-hmm.
not jeopardized. How did we
Yeah.
get here? I don't know. My weird rambly brain.
No, it's
Oh
fascinating.
yeah,
I like the
Yeah.
like inner workings of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
yeah.
just can't picture anyone saying no to you. Like if I were
I
your
know that
publisher and you
too.
were
Oh, it
like
happens so much.
I would
I
be
know.
shocked. I would be shocked. Like that would be like my next protest that I go to would be like, don't say no to her. Like let her just give us what she wants. Cause like God, it was
I
probably two
appreciate that.
years ago you and I talked about ideas because I had like we kind of had a very similar idea.
Oh wow.
And I was like, oh my God. Like, so I mean, I just can't imagine anyone saying no to you. Cause even when like you give me like a 2 or 3 sentence like idea, I'm like, do it.
Mhm.
Like I will take
See,
it.
first of all, I love you. Thank you. And thank you for also like hashing out ideas with me in the DMs. It's so helpful. Um, that is actually the one that we talked about that we had, and I'm not saying it because like maybe one day I will sell it. I don't know, but that's the one everyone keeps saying no to.
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
Okay, I'll just say it's like a sorority girl slasher, sort of
Yeah.
twist on it,
Uh-huh.
like a take on it, where the sorority girls aren't the victims, but the like
Mm.
slashers, and
Of
it's kind of
course.
Yellow Jackets-esque.
Yes.
Yes, and kind
Yeah.
of other things. That's the one that I keep pitching, and people keep choosing the other options because I like
Huh.
to bring my editors like multiple options
Yeah.
because again, people pleaser. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you something you want, I hope.
Yes.
And I'm gonna try to manage that by giving you lots of options. And then
Yeah.
consistently they just choose the other one.
Hmm.
But yeah, so
Interesting.
my publishing or writing schedule does not let up in 2024, but there's no promotion, which
Yeah.
one of the biggest
Mhm.
shocks to me of being a writer was what a big percentage of your time is spent promoting.
I bet.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that this is like people are really talking about this right now, like
Mhm.
all of the expectations on writers to know how to promote and conduct themselves online and
Mm.
conduct themselves in professional spaces with other writers. And I know this is like, you know, part and parcel of all the drama
Uh-huh.
that's unfolding. And it's true that no one prepares writers for any of that. And I would argue people who are probably the least well positioned to like be thoughtful promoters and marketing folks are like us little nerds who want to hide behind our computers and write things, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I mean,
So
you're with the right group with that.
yeah,
I was gonna say, I was
They're
like,
like,
so
oh,
all of
yeah.
us. I was like, are we the best promoters?
I know, right?
you are. You really are.
We
Well,
are.
you both have like you're beautiful, eloquent speakers. You're so natural and comfortable in front of a camera and talking to writers, like and interviewing. That is not a native skill, I would say, for the vast majority of people and especially writers. And sometimes I will like hop into a writer, doing a Q&A or whatever, an
Yeah.
Instagram live, and and I'll be like, oh, honey, you are so nervous,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
shut down and reserved. And I can feel the interviewer really struggling to like get
Mhm.
things out of that person. And, I just feel bad because I'm like, you weren't prepared for this part of
Right.
being a writer. But anyway,
Yeah.
that I feel like we could have an entire conversation
I
about all
know.
things publishing doesn't prepare you for. But
I know. They should
Especially a good
have
blog
like,
post for with all that free
yeah.
time you have to write it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know you need more writing assignments,
I'll add it to
so
the list.
right.
Yeah, add it to the list. I know. I basically had to tell my publicist for the last two books because with Dreams, I had more free time. So she was like, oh, why don't you write about like all these nonfiction articles about dark academia and why it's interesting,
Mm.
why people are drawn to it. And I had so much fun. I like wrote for Slate and all these other places about, dark academia and student debt and like people being disillusioned by
Mm.
like the shiny veneer of college, but also deeply nostalgic for like that old idea of what it used to feel like to be on campus, a
Mhm.
thing that increasingly doesn't exist. So I was like writing
Mhm.
about all that, and I had to tell her like, as much as I would love to write about like teenage girlhood and monstrosity and
Yeah.
the Southern Gothic,
Yes.
from a
Yeah.
woman's perspective and all these things that were in my head and like the
Yeah.
twilight of it all and why I chose
Yes.
to center that book in my book. I was just like, I have no time.
I
And I've
bet.
really missed doing that because it gave
Yeah.
me so many things to talk about with people
Yeah.
for Dreams. But anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
That's a
Oh,
really good
I can
point.
imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure
I can talk
I could
about,
write. There you go.
my God.
guys are
I
I
could
so
I could have written about this book forever. Like when I was trying to write my review, I was like, how do I say all of it? So I can only imagine if I wrote it, how much I could write about it.
yeah,
oh,
I could. I mean, in my dreams, I hold a knife is like, that's like my Donna Tartt. Like, you know how like people talk about like the secret history?
Yes. Yeah. Oh
Like
yeah.
I like that is like 20 years from now, I'm gonna be that like man that's like, I remember when this book came out, it was like the best. But
Yes.
like that's like my Donna Tartt book. Like
oh my
I
god.
could talk
Yeah, I
about
agree.
in my dreams I hold a knife until I'm blue in the face.
I
Same
love
here.
you and appreciate that so much, but I also cannot be compared to Donna Tartt because she's too iconic. And like obviously she did really in a lot of ways like give birth to dark academia.
Right,
So,
right.
everything is owed to her. But I keep laughing because when I was a baby writer and hadn't learned not to go on Goodreads,
Oh,
I know. No, it ends up okay, I promise.
oh,
Which
that's
I have
good.
now since learned not to go on Goodreads.
Yeah.
But there were some like 1 star and 2 star ratings of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife that like made me laugh so hard. One was just like 1 star. What, this bitch thinks she's Donna Tartt next. And I was just
That's amazing.
and then the other one was like 2 star grocery store version of Secret History. I
Oh
was just
no.
like, and I was like, I wish I in my
Right.
dreams was stocked at grocery stores. Like that would be amazing. That would be a
Yeah, that's what
victory
people don't
for me.
realize.
Yeah, you
I
don't
those are
realize.
I
those
Um,
just
are
don't think you recognize how iconic you are though.
I think
not
it's
at all.
hard to
Um,
recognize
If
I
I
when
were
you
Ashley
for
Winstead, I would
yourself.
only be wearing t-shirts that says I'm fucking iconic on them. Like that would be my vibe.
That is amazing,
I
and
I just
also
feel
my
her older daughter perfectionism, so I know that you never like fully feel
no,
who
there's
you are
no day of
always.
my life that I will not feel like an imposter who has hoodwinked anyone who's ever read one of my books and liked it
Mm-hmm.
into like being nice to me, you know?
Oh my
And
gosh.
that is like just the reality. But I'm okay with it. I've like learned to embrace it because I will
Mm-hmm.
never be one of those. I have met writers
Right.
who could use some of a dash of that. You know, I've
Mm-hmm.
met crazy people, and I'm okay because for like it will just keep me striving. It will keep
Yeah.
Yeah.
me like working. It will
Yeah.
I will never satisfy myself, and I know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll keep me
Humble.
like
Humble's better
yeah,
than arrogant,
grinding.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, is it
We're
always
putting a
fully
positive
healthy?
spin on it.
But yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
trying. Is it fully healthy? Do I have like unnecessary anxiety? Sure, sure, sure. Putting all that
Right.
stuff is
Right.
um
It might be
yeah,
part of
but
why you can write what you write so well, though, because like you're like in touch with those feelings yourself, and like because your
Mhm.
books all come from like a very vulnerable place. Even like with In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, you still feel a lot of the characters like very
yeah.
vulnerable feelings, like what makes them like act desperate or something. And I feel like that's actually that can also like make the writing really good because you can really write those characters that have those feelings.
Yeah, all of that with my characters, the toxic perfectionism, the like near debilitating sense of shame and like being a
Mhm.
fraud, all of that came by honest, just took out of my little brain and put it in the characters and was like, okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna see if we can make a career out of writing like the worst little corners of your heart into
Yes.
uh, books and figuring out ways to turn it into crime fiction.
Yeah.
Um, so
Now, I feel like it
that's
was really relevant in Midnight is the Darkest Hour because it's a younger character too, and like you are feeling her like how vulnerable you feel as a teenage girl as well, and like all of the really my dog is trying to scare me and jumping at me right now. Um, I'm just like trying to talk about teenage girlhood, and like how vulnerable that whole experience is. Even
yes.
like one of the things I thought was so cool, there's lots that I loved in the book, but like one that I thought was so cool was even touching on like fangirl dumb, and like
Uh-huh.
why are we judging it? Like why are we judging people for something that like is bringing them joy? And I
Yeah.
love that I love that part of the book. In the
Hey,
use
I
of
feel like
toys
you
as like
are
the last thing that we judge
sorry.
girls for a lot. No, you're good.
No, I just like it like it never ceases to amaze me how you see my books, like how you read my books. It is such a
Mhm.
gift.
Aw.
Everything that I put in them, you know, it's like a trust exercise because you're writing it in your book and you're hoping you don't want to beat readers over the head with anything, but you're really
Right.
hoping that they're going to catch what you're putting down and there's going to be this mind meld. And it is just like the most exhilarating experience to talk to you about my books because I'm like, I just want to be like, yes, 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 that is exactly what I was trying to do. And
Yeah.
that's like where my brain was going. And like
Yeah.
you summarized why it was important to me to write Midnight and like what the heart of that book was for me,
Mhm.
which was exploring like the vulnerability of being a teenage girl, and
Mhm.
all the many facets of it, you know, and fandom being one of them. And the fact that, you know, obsessive fans, like granted, you have the Marvel, predominantly male, like Marvel and sci-fi
Mhm.
fandoms, true, but no one gets the level of vitriol leveled at them, you know, no fandoms do, than the ones
Mhm.
that are composed primarily of like young women, teenage
Yeah.
girls. And I just am like, why does teenage girls having strong feelings bother people, like get crawl under people's skin so deeply? Like, what is it?
Yes.
And so those are like some of my guiding questions where I'm like, okay, well, let's explore this and all
Yeah.
the things that it could be in
Mhm.
this book. So that really And as you pointed out, Ruth is my youngest character. And I went
Mm-hmm.
to this booksellers conference in Portland in
Uh-huh.
September and was listening to another writer talk about her work. And she opened it up and said, like, by the way, my therapist has recently told me that whatever like age characters you write is kind of the age where you've stopped growing emotionally speaking, and it's like
Whoa.
kind of where you're stuck. And I was like,
Mm.
oh God, if that's
Whoa.
true, I keep going backwards and backwards. So all my characters keep getting younger and younger, like, 32, 28, like
Yeah.
30. Now Ruth is like 17 to 23. And I'm like, oh God, I'm regressing. Um,
What
but yeah,
happened
it
in high
was
school and college?
yeah, I mean, it was this book where I was like, I've always wanted to write about my teenage experience because I had
Mm,
a really fucked up one, but
mm,
also, so like I think you guys are just gonna get a very short version of this, but I um started to become a teenager. I was very shy, like good girl, straight A's, very quiet, very much a Ruth. I really put that into Ruth. And I started to like come into my rebellious teenage girl era when my parents started getting really deep into Southern Baptist religion. And so
oof.
those were like two opposing forces that really, really clashed.
Yes.
And it was like all of these things somehow hit at once. Like I started dating a boy who coincidentally I met in church, but I started dating a boy who was a little bit older than me. And we found out that he was like a sexual predator. Um, yeah. And I did not want to stop dating him because I didn't understand the gravity at the time of what
Mm-hmm.
he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was happening. My mom's best friend was brutally murdered, and we discovered her body. We
Oh,
were the ones,
man.
unfortunately. And I think that's like part of why I'm so drawn to crime fiction is like
Yeah.
it's that. And then so a lot of my family members unfortunately passed away like one after the other. So my senior year was this very, very tumultuous time where I went from being like forcibly baptized
Mm,
to discovering that my boyfriend was a sexual predator who now had to go to SAA meetings and like started going in and out of jail, to me being his like little Bonnie to his Clyde, not in the like more in the like drinking and driving,
yeah.
doing really regrettable illegal things like that, and like the police investigation, just all these things kind of hit at once. And my parents ended up locking me in my room at one point during my senior year so that I wouldn't get out because they were so scared of like where I was going to go. And
Man.
I know this is like,
Wow.
um, and of course, like as soon as I got free, I like ran away and lived out of my car for a few weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
I just had a very, very weird teenage experience. And
Mm-hmm.
everything has turned out okay. My parents stopped going to church. They just dropped it. One day, they were just done with it. Wild. I cut ties with the felon boyfriend once I went to college. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was an awful, like awful decision of mine. And so on and so forth. But it was such a unique experience in which I felt both more powerful than I ever
Mm,
had in my entire life. Like that feeling of like when you first start like noticing that you have power over people because of maybe the way you
mm,
look or, act or talk, or like that people will give you alcohol or drugs or whatever it is that you think
Hmm.
yeah.
makes you powerful, but whatever, more complicated. And yet like I was so suffocated and trapped in this small Southern Florida town. And, you know, with all of these people and authority figures crowding me down, literally locking me in places. And I've been wanting to write about that feeling for a long time. So that's what Midnight was for me.
Wow.
That is,
Like an
yeah,
exorcism.
all of that makes so much sense as a backstory, and then how
Yeah.
Ruth felt that real.
Yeah. She's like my wish fulfillment character because, you know, like I just went
Yes.
off to college and
Me
then
too.
things resolved. But like, but she, you know, spoiler alert, like actually burns shit down and stands up for herself and,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yes. Oh my
exact
gosh.
judgment.
Yes. Because the other, so you brought up even just now this really Southern Baptist, almost like kind of fundamentalist Christian religion is what you're typically getting into there.
Yeah.
And so so she's a pastor's kid. That's a big part of like what she's struggling with too. But without spoiling it, one of like in her almost penultimate moment, one of the things she says was like all of my dreams in one sentence. And Gare had like told me before, because he read it like before I did. He was like, there's gonna be a scene that you're gonna like lose your mind about. And I definitely lost my mind about it. So it's cool that like Ruth conquered like that stuff as well, since that was like, that would be so weird having like super hyper religion like contrasted with who you were like dating. It would be confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the kind of, just to add more things into the mix, Balrog, my cat, has joined the chat.
Pets are welcome.
Okay. We got a new brother. So well, I swear I'll get back to the book, but
Oh no, you're fine.
There was this stray cat who started showing up at our back door, and he had all of these gouges in his face, like bleeding, actively bleeding. And so we were like cleaning him up and giving him food. And he had his like tail was bent, like at some point it had been clearly broken and set the wrong way, and he just looked really like rough. But he looked young anyway. So he started feeding him, and he got to the point where he was like, every time our car turned the corner onto the street, he was running to meet the car and like standing there. And we were like, oh gosh. And we took him to the vet to get all of his cuts, because they kept being like fresh bleeding every day, and take care of him. And he started sleeping right outside of our back door. And just like looking in our glass window like all day.
He's like, hey guys.
So finally we're like, I know, he was so sweet too. All he wanted was to be pet. Like he would just immediately start purring. And my husband and I were like, he's so sweet. He's too sweet. He's too gentle for this outdoor life, this street life. You know, like something's gonna happen. So finally we were like, damn it. We have to bring him in, don't we? And this is, I think, week one, a full week of him being inside, and you would think that he had like lived with us forever. So anyway, so now we're a 3-cat household, which is a little bordering on cat lady. I don't know if the number's like 4 or what it is, but dangerously close.
So cute. Oh, I love that story.
My little, just couldn't. He's a sweetheart. And luckily, Balrog, who's this guy, is a little mama's boy. He just follows me everywhere. And he was very jealous at first, but now those two are like best friends and doing the Zooms together throughout the entire house. So this is very exciting.
Your cats get 3 a.m. zoomies? I hear cats get 3 a.m. zoomies. Okay. I'm allergic, so I've never lived with them.
Oh, I love cats so much. Truly, like I know you're a dog person, a pup, and have a pup, Gare. But I love cats so much. Like They are my children. Books and
Yeah.
cats are the kids that I will be
Oh
having in
yeah.
this life. And Shadow, who's our little adoptee, because he's all
Uh-huh.
black.
Oh.
He is obsessed with the cat toy, like the little, it's just like a
Mm,
stick with a string on it that you
yeah.
wave, and it's like he's never seen a toy before, which I don't know, maybe he hasn't. But he's so obsessed with it that he drags, it is like 3 feet long. He drags this thing around the house and will lay it at your feet to ask
Oh,
to play.
Oh.
But also at 3 a.m. he does this. So
oh
you'll hear
no.
like clink, 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 clink of it coming up the stairs. And then like clink, and then you'll get whacked in the face with like a stick, and you'll like wake up and he's just sitting there like, play, it's time to play. You're like, oh gosh. So you wave the little
Oh.
stick for a few times, and you're like, I'm sleeping, Shadow.
I'm going back to sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Anyway, back to
cute.
books.
It's adorable.
Yes.
Cats and books.
I know. Back to books.
Yeah.
So I forget what I was saying.
I think you
we
answered. I probably need to like come up with
Yeah.
another question.
Well,
just
I think like with Ruth, like, you know, you talk about like what it was like to be like a teenage girl at that point in your life and like how relatable it is. But like I like obviously didn't grow up a teenage girl. But like my like rebellious, like I was a very good kid. Like I didn't get like the best grades, but like I was like not breaking curfew. Like I was very good until I was 19. And
ah.
my rebellious stage like started like when I was in college and lasted until I was 30. And it was like one like major like take any like point in your life and I was like having a struggle with it and it was like really bad and I was really rebellious and like there were so many like issues that I was like having one after another until I was like 30 that like when I was like reading it I was like, you know, like this like makes sense to me because I was always like like most people like you have like one struggle like whether it's like addiction issues or like relationship issues or things like that and I was like until I read this book I was like what is going on with me that like I am struggling with like one aspect of my life after another for like 11 years straight and then I was like it's
Yeah.
just my rebellious like it's just the rebellious side of me and it's like situations that like I've gotten myself in and it's like things that like people warned you about when you were like a teenager that like if you do X, Y,
Mhm.
and Z, you can find yourself in this position and you just have to learn to say no or like kind of like stick up for yourself, which apparently I did not learn until I was 30. And so now I'm like, oh my God, like I totally like could relate to that character as like a 30, well now 36-year-old man like relating to that like character in that like rebellion stage because you know even though mine lasted 11 years of me doing like fucked up shit to myself and to others like I just was like anyone can relate to this
Why I'm
book if you
laughing?
really try. It's like I was a hot
Just
mess for
other than
11
I
years.
find it so relatable.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that like anybody who has like any like demon or anything in their
Yeah.
past that like they've like struggled with, like will be able to relate to Ruth in some way or another.
Yeah, that experience is universal, which is what I was banking on. Even though, so like with all my books, I forget, I think it was like a professor in grad school of mine said this, like the concrete universal. What is this theory that the best way and most powerful, cogent way to speak to universal human experiences is through the really concrete and particular and specific. And if you describe the specific experience of being like one kind of embodied person in the world and what it's like to be that person, if you do it well enough and authentically enough, then even like everyone who isn't like sharing that embodied experience but can picture it because of the work you've done will relate whatever it is that
The
they can
truth.
bring to it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
to the
like
truth of it.
it's a bridge from, and that's why good writing I'm not giving myself a compliment, but I'm saying like this is the goal for good writing always, is to be able to embody a specific particular experience well enough that all the readers that you know that don't share that particular lived experience are still going to be like understanding and feeling the ways in which they can relate that to their own life, and like establishing their own points of commonality, which is why reading is like the ultimate act of empathy. It's like so empathy making,
Yes.
which is also why it's so dangerous and why books need to be banned, according to people who don't want us to have
Right.
empathy for, you know,
Yeah.
for certain groups.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like that idea of I really wanted to write a book that felt like a captured a girl's Breaking Bad, captured a person's like, you know,
Yes.
Walter White experience, sort of, you know, starting with
Yes.
really good intentions and getting to really dark places with it. I wanted to capture that sort of coming of age feeling of suffocation versus empowerment. I wanted to capture like the seduction of being rebellious.
Yeah.
And it's like, so Gary, you're saying like, why do I do, you know, this one thing and then this other? Why not? It probably felt good to do some bad, I mean, not all of it, but enough it's like a slippery slope. And also one thing informs the other, you know? Like
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Well, I guess because I was such a good like child until like I went to college, when like when people talk about those like experiences and those like really like forming years of like
yeah.
their first relationship, their like first time that they were like drinking, their first like all of these like things of like these like active like rebellion or kind of like, growing up, it's like I didn't have that much of that experience. So when it was 19, it was like I'm going to I'm gonna have like my first like huge relationship, and I'm gonna pick the worst guy out there to date. And I did.
Yes.
I
We
nailed it. Like
oh,
I
rite
picked
of
like
passage.
I
Rite
picked
of
like
passage.
literally like the only thing he did not do to my knowledge was chop up a body, but he was like the worst person that you could ever date. Like my relationship with alcohol was like horrible
Mhm.
from like 19 until like 34.
In there.
Like breaking laws, like not caring about anything, hurting people, like hurting myself, like
Mhm.
so like all of those things that most people did within like a few years of their like
15 to
teen-
22.
I was like, I'm gonna stretch this out a little
Just
bit
adjust it.
to like dip my toe in every pond I can, and when it comes to crazy, like self-sabotaging behavior. And but I mean, the thing like with Ruth that I really like enjoyed about her character was how well you captured all of that, because I think in a cliche way, most people have a character that young. She only knows one emotion, and it's fear, because she's put in a
Yeah.
dangerous situation because there's something she's trying to figure out, but it's always like, well, she's so young and she's so afraid. And it might be usually a YA book. So for you to have
Mhm.
like an adult thriller with a character this young that was just like that well thought out, that well written, that went through all of those emotions, that felt like a real person when you're reading that, like I think that's what captures you in those moments where you've been rebellious or where you've had to like deal with things that like may not be Ruth's situation, but similar, and those emotions and feelings.
Thank you. That really means a lot to me. And I will on a when you were talking about just like hitting all of the rebellious things, like ripping off all the band-aids at once. This is not related to my book, but it just made me think about when I was 16, I went on a class field trip to Spain, and we like lived there for 2 months, I think.
Whoa.
And it was all, yeah. And it was this very cool opportunity. We got through school, and none of the parents who sent their kids, their teenagers, realized that it was as unsupervised as it was. And we all just
God.
like went to live with people in the community. And then
Oh
we're
my gosh.
expected to get ourselves to the college every day for the lessons, and the rest of the day and night was ours. And the drinking age is much different in Spain. Basically,
Mhm.
if you can like, see over the counter, they're
Yeah.
going to serve you.
Yeah.
And so you had a bunch of 16-year-olds legally drinking, and it was a bacchanalia. And the one thing that everyone said going when we first realized, like, oh God, we can do anything here, was like, there was this girl, I'll call her code name Rachel, not for her, that's not her real name, but she was like this super, super sheltered, shy girl whose parents kind of like really kept her in a bubble and didn't let her go and do things and really monitored the way she dressed. And it was like she was really controlled. And everyone's like, Rachel, what's going to happen to Rachel? Well, she might go crazy. Like, what's she going to do? Sure enough, night like 4 of this trip, we stumble at 2 a.m. down an alleyway, and who is face down in this alleyway because she has drank too much, too many chupitos, too many shots at the shop bar, other than Rachel. She
Oh
was
Oh
just
God.
like
man.
that one little taste of freedom, and she went buck wild. And so of course we like helped her up, had to take her to get some medical attention, and she ended up going home.
Yeah.
Because she was like,
My
I am
gosh.
not prepared for this, like I'm not suited for this. But it's always the Rachels of the group who are like, you know, the ones where you need to start introducing your kids to drugs and alcohol semi early, is my theory about parenting.
Yes.
But also
Yeah.
I will never be an actual parent, so I don't
No.
have to actually
Well,
test that theory in real
Right.
life, so take that with a grain of salt.
I actually like have to like piggyback off from that. Like I
Do
worked
you have a
for
Rachel?
I have
I
like
was
probably 10.
Rachel.
You were?
Oh yeah, everything about what I wore, like nothing from my like age 0 to 16 was like my choice.
Oh
So
my gosh.
and somehow I didn't have like that moment, but I think it's because of the way that I had to separate myself and then just immediately be an adult to get away from some stuff. I think that's
Ah,
why it kind of happened. Not that I don't have my rebellions. I still have my rebellions. They just weren't like drinking, but otherwise I was Rachel. I was very much Rachel. And everyone thought I was going to go crazy. Everyone was like constantly wanted to be the one that like got me drunk. So,
yeah, that corrupted you.
yeah,
Wow. You
exactly.
are Ruth and they were Everett's too, I
Yes.
gotta say.
Well,
I
and if you'd
had
ask my mom, it would be like an Everett situation that pulled me out of the family, but I married him, so
Okay,
oh,
so they can't say shit now.
I
no.
love your Everett. I love your Everett. Your Everett can influence
Anyway, I
me
didn't mean to steal
anytime
your
because I love your Everett. So maybe to like lighten the mood more a little bit based off from going off from Rebellion. I don't know if you watch What Happens Live, but they have those like interview questions, and Andy Cohen will ask like out of all the cast members like da 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 da. So maybe to wrap things up on like a light end, Kate and I can ask you some questions and you can pick between your 3 little thriller babies
Oh,
to
love
see
it.
which one
Yeah.
fits. So um, which of your 3 thrillers would you say is like the one that just flowed out very naturally for you?
That would have to be Dreams, because I wrote it in a very dark place and just kind of like everything came out. I was basically like confessing while writing that book. And then second would be Midnight, because out of all my characters, Ruth's voice came to me the clearest. It was I'd been wanting to write a thriller that had like the tenor and tone of a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale. And so because Ruth is my little bookworm, her interiority, like her inner monologue voice, is shaped by all the books she's read. And so it has like a little bit of like an elevated, very bookish, sort of fairy tale-esque tone to it. And it was so fun to like experiment with writing in that voice. So that would be number 2. Last Housewife was a bitch to write. It's just like pulling teeth. It was very hard.
I can imagine that
Oh my
that would be a very
Yes.
hard book to write.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, my question, I know you kind of plot, you're not like a pantser, but
Yep, not at all.
which one like surprised you the most when you were even kind of like getting the plot out?
Yeah, I will say Midnight's the Darkest Hour. The end took me by surprise because when I initially pitched it, it had a whole different ending. And it was very, very bonkers, turned the genre supernatural, paranormal, and I was told
Ooh.
by my editor and agent, well, but mostly my agent, like, don't do it. Yeah. So
Interesting.
I had this whole idea, and we're not doing spoilers, so I don't want to spoil the ending of the book, but it was very, very bonkers. It really hewed to the theme of the book of teenage girls being monsters. Wink, wink.
Nice.
But
I
so
wondered if it was going in that direction, so that like
yeah,
makes me so excited to know that it was at some point.
it
Oh,
was
that's so cool.
originally. It was
That's so
originally,
cool.
and then my agent kind of re-steered me. She was basically like, where do you want this book to be shelved in a bookstore? Because if you go in this direction, it's going to be shelved like potentially in SFF. Or, you know, whatever. And like, we were thinking about that, but I do kind of call bullshit on our worries now, seeing how popular paranormal thrillers have gotten, like in the mainstream, like
Yeah.
Riley's. I feel like I'm just finished Christina McDonald's latest book that's going to be coming out next year, What Lies in Darkness, and it's the follow-up to These Still Black Waters.
Yep.
And it's got ghosts in it, just like the first book. So
Mhm.
and these are all like mainstream thrillers not being shelved in SFF.
Right.
So I do think maybe our concerns were a little overblown, but basically
Yeah.
I had to surprise myself by coming up with
Oh,
like a whole new ending that also felt very true and perfect to the characters. And I will say, now that the ending is what it is, I'm so glad that I went there and didn't
that's
go with my
cool.
original idea, because I think it suits it so much better. Suits the
Yeah.
characters so much better, and it's like an ending that is emotionally true to them more than
Yes.
it is like a
Mhm.
twisty plot point.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
us thriller writers, maybe it's just me, like succumb to twist pressure where you're like, oh
Yes.
God, you know, like so and so did this and it blew everyone's minds, and now I've got to like be even better, or at least be on the same level. You know, it's just like, or I
Right.
did this before and people loved it, I have to do that again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
um so that can really get in your head and
I
convince you to
bet.
do some things that maybe aren't, that you need like the wise counsel of an agent to talk you down from that ledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry, that was a long answer to that,
No,
surprising,
that's
but
good.
yeah, I think that surprised me. Also, Dawn, who is a character in The Last Housewife, surprised the hell out of me, because when I started, he was such a men's rights, like right winger, like incel-esque sort of person. And then as I was writing him, he became this guy who was really well versed in like feminist discourse and was really good at twisting like third wave feminism and
Yes.
other things around to like convince and persuade the girls to like, you know, let him do things with them that
Mhm.
they might not otherwise. So he
Yeah.
really surprised me in how diabolical he was.
You
Yes.
and me
Me
both.
too.
I like this
Oh,
game.
yeah.
It's
Well,
fun.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us tonight.
You are
Yes.
so welcome.
I had such
I
a good
am like,
time.
I know, as you both know, I could talk to you literally forever. Like,
Yes.
Yes.
this
Same.
could be a 12-hour podcast, and I would just be
It could.
happily, like, door dashing meals and just like picking them up and be like, okay, now we're on dinner,
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you're
Yeah.
really speaking our language. You're talking about
Yeah.
100%.
DoorDash.
100%. Well, I hope that everybody has their copy of Midnight is the Darkest Hour. And if you haven't checked it out
Mhm.
yet, it would make an amazing Christmas present for yourself
Yes,
or your favorite book bestie. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. And please know that all you have to do is say the word and you can come back anytime that you want to.
Thank you both
Yes.
so much. I am in the phase of writing my next book where it's like all I'm thinking about and I'm super into it. And all I can think about is how much I can't wait to share it with you both
I'm so
and
excited.
talk to you
So
about
excited.
it. So, yes, very much looking forward to that. I hope that's in the future. Maybe
Yes.
next year, as soon as arcs go out, I'll just like get them to you and then be like,
Yes.
can we talk?
Yes.
Did you have
And we
enough
will.
30
And we
minutes?
will.
Did you have enough time to read
Will.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Love you
All
guys. And I
right.
hope your
I love you
holidays are
too.
amazing.
You
Yes.
too.
I hope you have a great holiday and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We love you.
Love you. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.